Warning, this podcast contains adult language and is not suited for children. Welcome to Squared Circle Sit Down. I'm Drake.
And I'm Joe. Hello.
And this is the weekly podcast where we talk about all things wrestling, or at least the ones we like.
Yeah, and on that topic, Drake, I just have to tell you, I have been watching wrestling since the year 2000. I was a kid, I'd say preteen, about 11 years old at the time, and I watched WWF, and they were in a phase where there was this brand new guy as a champion, and he was amazing but awful. His name was Kurt Angle, and they were just getting through this storyline of Stone Cold Steve Austin returning, and I didn't have cable television. I watched SmackDown every week. That's what I had to look forward to, and I looked forward to SmackDown every week. And I didn't get to watch pay-per-views. I was lucky enough to get invited over to a friend's house where his parents would let him watch a pay-per-view every so many months of the year. So maybe I saw a few, and my dad was nice enough to let me rent a VHS months afterwards so I could see how things happened that I already knew what had happened, because things haven't changed so much. WWE still shows you all the replays of everything over and over again on weekly television. But I loved wrestling then. I still love wrestling now in a different way. But for the first time in a very long time, I find myself looking forward to a weekly wrestling show. And that's after a pay-per-view that I can't tell you the last time I've looked forward to a weekly wrestling show because of something that happened at a pay-per-view. And AEW has somehow done that with Full Gear.
I love hearing that. And I can absolutely empathize with you because AEW did that for me, like, almost at the beginning of the run. So, much like you, I think I started a year before.
99.
99. I was a wee bay at the time, starting my wrestling, watching, and I watched a lot of old stuff because my father was a wrestling fan long before he met my mother. And I used to also be lucky enough to get invited to houses to watch pay-per-views on occasion, rent VHSs, eventually, like, DVDs just before I finally was able to start getting it.
Yeah, the PS2 wasn't out yet. I didn't have a player.
Yup. And my one of my family friends was big on tape trading, so I was able to get a lot of, like, ECW, which, to be fair, he probably shouldn't do much, but and like the pay-per-views and stuff. And I'll admit that a number of years ago I got, like, super jaded. It just didn't have that same excitement, that same flair for me either. And I remember, I think we talked about this, where the draft in particular was something that I was always really excited for ever since they first, like, implemented it. And then the last, like, couple were just super lackluster, and I just didn't care anymore. And it was a big point.
From my perspective on the draft, like, I was a kid that was only watching one show.
Yeah.
Didn't even have access to the other show. So I share that excitement of, hey, here's a guy that I've never seen wrestle before, finally, on this show. And that was amazing. So yeah, I get that.
I was absolutely, like, the SmackDown baby, right? And then a couple years ago, I think it was not when they did the USA Fox, but right before that, the one they did right before that, where I think number 1 and 2 were, like, Rollins and Moxley.
2016.
My goodness, so fucking long ago. Was when I realized, it wasn't when it happened, but it was when I realized that I just wasn't really that excited about this. And I didn't really watch it enough. And I didn't always keep up. And I'd still watch the pay-per-views, of course. But some of that was because of the social interaction that came with it, right? The people that I'd be able to share that with. I'd always have, like, people over and whatever. And AEW, as it began to be birthed, right, when it was a t-shirt company and stuff, I was super jaded about it. Okay, well, this is cool, but how much traction can they really get? How deep can they go, especially with, no offense to them, the guys who were behind it being behind it, right? You had the Young Bucks and Kenny and Cody, who, even though they were very entertaining and super over, felt very markish. Like, they had a very specific thing that they did, and it's like, can you really translate that to a weekly show? And then I remember my partner was like, Chris Jericho. And I'm like, no fucking way. Chris Jericho. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's cool. What does that mean, right? And every step of the way as we got to, like, the first episode of Dynamite, I still was very jaded. And I remember I watched that first episode, the first 10 minutes, where they were very clear about wanting to feel like the unofficial love child of WCW, right? They didn't shy away from it. They were like, here we are on TNT. Here we are after the match, where we show you the, like, clips of all the best parts of the match for, like, every match. And our commentary table is literally Tony Schiavone and JR, and it's like, what? And it was all these little things, and then they pulled from the indies so well too, so quickly, which was kind of my lifeboat after I fell off like WWE, because that's, you know, where you could still get solid content even if it didn't have the same production value. So I remember just how my excitement just built. And then by the time that first episode of Dynamite was over, I was like, wow, I haven't felt like this in forever. And I remember I turned to my partner, and I told her, oh my goodness, I haven't felt this excited for us in years. And then they had their first pay-per-view, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this, but, like, I can't wait for Wednesday. And that kind of hasn't gone away ever. So it's just been this crazy ride of, like, being a fan again and being so excited about it. It's just been such a cool experience. I'm so glad other people are feeling that.
Yeah, I'm somebody who had that, and has had that for years for pay-per-views. I've been excited for pay-per-views, or specifically with NXT takeovers.
Oh, yeah.
Those are events that I got excited for. I wanted to watch them. I wanted to see the talent involved. NXT, the weekly show, was probably the last weekly show that I got invested in enough that on occasion I could say I was excited and anticipating it being on. And that was several years ago now, well before they went to 2 hours. Definitely still the 1 hour format, where they would usually announce most, if not every match on the card a week in advance, so you knew what was coming. So that was great, which is another thing that AEW does a very, very good job doing, where they will tell you, even after Full Gear, at Full Gear, they're telling you, hey, tune into Dynamite on Wednesday because we have the following matches coming. It feels like with their pay-per-view scheduling, they always want something next. Always. Like, WWE loves to just say, hey, we have one pay-per-view every month, so give you 4 weeks of TV, bam, there's a pay-per-view. 4 weeks of TV, bam, there's a pay-per-view. And it felt, especially once they switched to the network, I was somebody who was like, all right, I'll just pay you $10 a month and then just watch the pay-per-views. I don't need to watch the TV show anymore because the pay-per-views are so frequent. I feel like I'm getting everything all the time. And if I didn't see you on a pay-per-view, you probably didn't matter. And for AEW, there are people that are not on their pay-per-views that matter a lot. Because there's only so many pay-per-views and there's only so many matches they can have on every card. So I can get excited to see a women's title tournament that's almost exclusively on TV. I can get excited for world title tournaments, like qualifying tournaments, that are exclusively on TV and give you matches like Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson. And that's a TV match. In WWE, that's a pay-per-view match that you get 3 of in the course of 3 months. In AEW, that's a match that you have to tune in on a Friday night to see. Or a Wednesday night. And that's something that I look forward to. Back in the day, I knew that I was going to get even if it was pre-taped, this is before I could go on some message board and get all the spoilers because SmackDown was taped. But I'm getting, Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar in an Iron Man match, and I can tune into that on a Thursday night and say, hey, wow, like, I want to see this. This is amazing. This is awesome. This is two of the best wrestlers in the world that are going to go at each other for an hour. And yeah, they didn't do that all the time, but when they did, it was an event. It felt like something special, especially for somebody that couldn't watch every pay-per-view. So when AEW is doing this, yeah, of course I'm going to get excited, but I'm noticing I'm getting excited now.
Which is great. And to build off that again, it's so interesting that you bring up like SmackDown, especially in those years, because SmackDown really did for quite a while just consistently put out good content, right? Whether it was the storytelling or it was the matches. Usually the matches were never terrible. They were always between like acceptable and like, phenomenal. And the storylines were usually pretty good even for. And AEW really encapsulates that. They've done such a good job of taking that, but also being like, okay, our matches are either going to be super story heavy, like, if we're being honest, we know Dynamite this week, we're going to have Evil Uno versus Bryan Danielson. And the reality is, it's not going to be a 5-star match. Which is fine. Not every match has to be. But it's going to be such a good bit of storytelling to get us where we're going next. But every match on Dynamite cards usually is either phenomenal wrestling, great storytelling, or both. So they keep you there through the whole episode, which is phenomenal.
Or I'll add a piece to that, and that is it's a building block. It's a little something. It's a toe in the water to test the temperature. It's something. It's never nothing.
Yeah.
AEW squash matches are matches. WWE squash matches are one person looks good, the other person looks. You don't even look at them. They just get squashed. That's it.
Yeah. Look at how, despite I'm never gonna let this go, despite at least one critic, how much better Alan Angels has looked for having been in the ring. What was it? It was like 7 or 10 minutes with Kenny Omega and getting some offense in, and how it literally did zero damage to Kenny Omega's career or credibility. Right? The only people who looked at that and were like, now he looks weaker, are the people who already were like, Kenny Omega's Kenny Omega, and we don't take it serious. Anyone who looks at him and is like, best bout machine, great storyteller, phenomenal wrestler, no one looked at him and saw him any less because Alan Angels got to do a couple things. And AEW has really run with that. One of the things I feel like keeps them honest in that regard is our wins and losses matter. Because we do have records. Even if they're annual, even if they reset, the reality is having those numbers and constantly portraying them on screens and like in lower thirds and constantly talking about it means they have to be attentive to who wins where, and how. Because it's not like they said, quality of match matters too. And that's another thing they talk about. They'll constantly be like, well, Jungle Boy's a great one, where it's like, he got to 50 wins. And it was like, that's amazing. And think about some of the people he's beat along the way. Think about the losses he goes. And you see, even in smaller ways, things like that, where it's like, well, Bryan Danielson has this record now. He's undefeated, and the one time he didn't win was a time limit draw with Kenny Omega.
Yeah. And speaking of wins and losses, that kind of ties perfectly into the first match, Full Gear, of the story of MJF and the 4 pillars of AEW, where his whole mission is, I'm going to be the one pillar that's the best one. Mm-hmm. And fits into, the MJF character of, I'm better than you and you know it, but I, peek behind the curtain of technical difficulties. I've said this before. MJF is somebody who does his job incredibly well, no matter what angle you want to look at it from. He's somebody who shows up to work in a company where, if you want to say wins and losses matter, MJF is a winner. Is he an asshole? Yeah. But he's a winner. If you want to say, he's playing a character, okay, he plays his character incredibly well, and his character wants to be a winner, and he's a winner. It's what he does. It doesn't matter how he wins. He wins. It didn't matter if Darby Allin was going to get himself disqualified and MJF was going to get a skateboard to the head. MJF will stitch that right back up, come right out on a Wednesday or a Friday or whenever he feels like it, and say, see, I told you, I beat Darby Allin. And if people are like, yeah, but Darby Allin beat you up, he'd be like, and look at the record. I won, he lost. That's all that matters. And he did even more than that. And he put the higher stipulation of how I'm going to beat him, and he did it with the headlock takeover after cheating. But still, it's MJF. That's what you get.
Right, because the reality is, in order for MJF to be the person he is, to himself, that always has to be true. He always has to mean what he says, and he has to believe it. Doesn't matter how we get there, as long as we get there. The moment that it stops being true, we start to see cracks in this stuff, right? We start to see those moments of weakness. There's a really good documentary that I know you and I have discussed before, but not here, called Making Maxwell Jacob. Haven't seen it. 100% worth seeing. I will put the link in the YouTube description for this video so that anyone who hasn't seen it can.
It's both great and disturbing.
Oh yeah, because it's such a fantastic look behind the curtain in kayfabe, where he is exactly the same person he is, except he's trying to portray himself as who he wants people to see him as, not who he is. And when that doesn't fit, you can see the character behind that character. It's phenomenal.
And the match was really good, too.
The match exceeded my expectations by a huge amount.
Having watched it back since we last attempted to record, it is my second favorite match of Full Gear. Of course, we will get to my favorite one, as this was the first match. I did not expect it to be the first match on the card to go on. I not expect it to exceed my expectations in the way that it did. And that is not only by telling the story that it told, which I expected an MJF victory. I got an MJF victory. But this was a technically very good match. I would say even great match, where MJF actually showed up in a way that he hasn't had to, or the story didn't call for it, or whatever the case may be. I would like Darby Allin to be a little bit safer with those apron bumps and some of his timing, but that's Darby Allin. I hope for the best.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you on those bumps. I don't care if it's him, Ospreay, or Ibushi, or whoever it is taking them. It's always rough, and I hope that it's not something that creates long-term issues. But without getting too far off topic, I think that another really interesting thing here is, so MJF talked a lot about the 4 pillars, and that's not new, right? Like AEW's talked about that a lot. So this is him beating the last of them, right? The last of the 4 pillars. He's beaten Guevara, he's beaten Jungle Boy, now he's defeated Darby Allin. He is officially at the top of the 4 pillars of AEW, which is great, especially with the character. He's going to use that. He's going to use it very well. The thing that I think also was really interesting here is how much more it felt like setting them up as foils to each other than him with any of the other pillars, right? There is this very distinct line that even before now existed, just in how they wrestle, how they portray themselves, how they cut promos, how they act, how they're treated. But now, having had them wrestle and do everything that they did the way that they did, this is something that I think is absolutely long-term investment. This will follow their careers forever, is they will be the opposite sides of the coin. And I think they're always going to be chasing each other, at least in some way, which is really exciting. And the groundwork was laid for that in what feels like, the closing of a chapter, which we'll talk more about later. I also feel like, barring the main event, this was the match of the night, but it was not my favorite match, barring the main event.
That's fair. That's totally fair. For the Four Pillars thing, it reminds me so much of the women's roster in WWE. Maybe not right now, but the way it was set up for a while with the four horsewomen coming out of NXT and then on the main roster of Bayley, Becky, Charlotte, and Sasha, where you had the four of them, and yeah, they were portrayed as a group of four, as in they were all close. I'm not going to say equal, but like close. And I think anybody paying attention to the product or even just being a fan of the product and the fan of them, or even one of them, could look and say, all right, if you take the four of them and you stack them up against each other, at different points in time, the pecking order was different. And it changed a lot. Becky was near the bottom most of the time until that kind of, I don't even know what else to call it, like historic rise to the top to literally main event the biggest show. And when you have something like that, it's like, okay, she leapfrogs to the front, but then the rest of them shift, and those positions keep shifting. Now you can kind of do that in a way that the body of work is large enough that you can do that with the Four Pillars. And they have enough matches, they have enough accomplishments, they've faced each other enough times, like this is checking almost the last box for that. And you can say, like, MJF, in a way, his character embodies that thought process of, I know that just because you're putting the four of us in a category together, that people are going to rank the category. They're going to look at it, and I'm MJF. I am nothing if not first. And now he got to solidify that he's first. And he might not be first in terms of technical ability and all that stuff to everybody, but for him and what his character does, this was a box he had to check. And I love that he did, because it gives so much more room for everybody to go different directions and do everything.
Definitely. I think this was a phenomenal match. Everything fell into place properly. I think that it's going to be really exciting going forward to see what happens the next time any of these guys face off. I'm trying to remember if there are any mixture of the four of them that we haven't seen. I don't know if we've seen Jungle Boy and Dark. Have we?
I think that might be the only one that we haven't seen.
Right, that's the one I can't seem to remember, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely know that, I mean, obviously MJF has faced all three, and Sammy was a heel for a while. Mm-hmm. Has faced, I believe, both Jungle Boy and Darby.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he faced Darby pretty early into Dynamite's run.
Yeah, and if not one-on-one, then definitely in some of those mixed, like, you know, tag trio matches. Or they've definitely squared off in Battle Royals.
Okay, so moving on to our next match, we've got the Lucha Brothers versus FTR.
This one didn't hit for me. It was a good match, as expected, but this was one that was, as much as MJF and Darby exceeded my expectations, this is a match that I thought could have been the match of the night. You know, looking at it on a sheet of paper, I know that there are so many other good ones that also could have been on that list, but if you picked this one going in as what you thought would have been the match of the night, I would have said, yeah, sure. I believe you, definitely. If I hadn't watched it and you came out and told me it was the match of the night, yeah, cool. I believe you. I'm excited to watch it. And then we got kind of an ending that was a little off. It felt like something went wrong. It felt like somebody missed a cue. Maybe Dax got hurt. Still don't really have any solid update on that, I don't think.
Not from what I've seen.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened there with the whole, they're going to put the masks on. They technically pinned the illegal man. So it looks like we're going to get another rematch. That's fine. I'm totally okay with these guys facing each other again. That's great. But it felt like a almost rushed, weak ending that makes sense when you think about it, but didn't match the speed, the tempo, the vibe of what they were doing, the story pacing in the ring. And even the crowd seemed to just kind of quickly like expect a kick out or expect, you know, something to happen there. And then the match just ended. And they were like, okay, yay, the team we wanted to win won. That's cool, but all right, I guess what happened there?
Yeah, I have to agree. I feel like it definitely fell flat. Sometimes, and I'm pretty vocal about this, there are times where it feels like Pentagon, in particular, but the Lucha Brothers, kind of phoned it in. I don't think that's what happened here. I think there was just... The pacing of the match felt a little strange, almost from beginning to end. Penta was he relied a little too heavily on the gimmick, right? Which he does sometimes, where like there was a point in the match where he does they had just like kicked the hell out of, I think it was Cash, and instead of capitalizing on it, he just like grabs him and he's holding him there, and he's like calling out to Tully on the outside so he can do the ceremonial, and it's like, alright, but wouldn't you rather win? And it felt kind of weak. And that also sort of led into where we got to at the finish. I don't know if maybe there was an injury or if it really could just have been one of those finishes that sounded good on paper and didn't play out well. It definitely didn't fit the vibe. And I think that it had a huge effect on the match, even just looking back at it, as far as the quality of it. I'm not a big fan of the whole Super Ranas thing. I didn't like it when they did it the first time. I don't like it now. I don't care for it. I do like that they hit a grand... what is it? Grand amplitude? Grand altitude?
Oh, grand amplitude, yes.
Grand amplitude. That was cool. And it's not the first time they've done that. It's like every time that they do one of these like big show matches, they bust out one of their like NXT rivals moves, like they did Meet in the Middle.
Yeah.
Was that against the Bucks? I think that was against the Bucks.
I believe so, yeah. It's been a while, so I don't exactly remember. But yes, also Grand Amplitude, the finisher of American Alpha, for anybody who doesn't know.
Yes.
Which team in NXT consisting of Chad Gable and Jay Jordan before he was Kurt Angle's son.
Okay. So that seems like a good opportunity for us to move on to the next match. Miro and Brian Daniels. Which, I mean, going into it, it was one of those matches where there was so much riding on it because of the implications for it. And I think that it definitely paid off. I think at the end of this match, Miro's a made man. He is officially a main eventer. He feels like a main eventer. He feels like the guy who's going to occupy that spot as the big, scary brute at the top of the card. One of my favorite promos that he ever cut was if you've got a title, you've got a problem. And now, man, if it doesn't feel that way. And sure, he could have won, but had he won, it would have been even more obvious how the night was going to end. So probably better he didn't. But these guys went in there and beat the living hell out of each other. And it was so good.
Yeah, of the, they're obviously champion and challenger in the main event. And here you have two people, so with the four people, you have only so many options of what you're going to get from it. And Hangman Adam Page versus Miro, okay, cool. Kenny Omega versus Miro doesn't really make any sense. So if Miro wins, you kind of only have one option of what's going to happen in the main event. Whereas Omega versus Danielson, there's history, there's precedent, there is definitely intrigue. So that's 100% a direction they could go in. I mean, that's a match we probably will get again anyway, eventually. Just when, we don't know. And then, obviously, Danielson versus Page, you have a situation where it's, okay, it's a little babyface versus babyface, but AEW has not shied away from doing babyface versus babyface, especially when it's in a big match with stipulation or something on the line, where you can play out this is a sports-like thing. Fans are going to cheer for both of these guys. And yay, let's go, let's do it. So with Danielson getting a win here, you have a situation where, all right, we're not just giving you the main event right now. This could still go either way. Maybe you're leaning a certain direction, but this could go either way. Or maybe you even want a specific winner now based on that. Because there are probably some people that definitely were starting to pull more for Kenny Omega because they want that rematch for the championship with Bryan Danielson. That's cool. Much like I said with the last match, this is another one where, on paper, writing it down, going in, if you walked in saying this was going to be the match of the night, I believe you. If you walked out and said it was your favorite match of the night, I'd still probably believe you. Even having watched it and saying this is shockingly like fourth on my list, which is astounding considering the volume of talent that AEW has on a single card. Insane. And yeah, MJF and Darby overperformed in my book. But still, the match itself, awesome. Like, what else is there to say about this? It's Miro who is doing the best work he's ever done, and it's Bryan Danielson being free.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing I want to talk about. It's Bryan Danielson being free. It's the return to the American Dragon, the guy who we knew back before the WWE days, before the bad NXT days, before any of that, who was just like, where CM Punk showed up and was like, I'm so excited to be here, and man, this is cool, and I want to help out all the young guys, and I want to impart my knowledge, and I want to be a part of making this a great thing. Bryan Danielson showed up and went, this place is pretty cool. I get off on having really good matches, but if you get in the ring with me, I'm gonna kick the shit out of you. Let's go. And it's so cool seeing him be that guy again, especially after having to fit in the white meat babyface box for so long in WWE, when they finally were like, okay, yeah, fine, you're a main eventer. Because that's the only way they could have him as a main eventer, as they were considering it. And AEW does such a good job of being like, okay, our people, our characters are not just face or just heel. They're human beings, and they're complex, and they have layers to them. So Bryan Danielson is a face because he doesn't do heel things, right? He doesn't cheat. He doesn't generally talk shit about the other guy. He keeps it between the bell, but it doesn't stop him from wrestling an incredibly impactful, aggressive, Moxley-esque pitbullish style in how he attacks you, which he couldn't really do for the last however many years. And it's so refreshing.
Yeah, we're gonna fight, and it's the blood, sweat, and tears thing of, we might bleed, we're definitely gonna sweat, and maybe one of us is going to make the other one cry. But at the end of it, I will respect, win, lose, or draw that. And right now it's just been wins. But I will respect the fact that we went out there and had a legitimate, hard-fought wrestling battle. And one of us is going to come out on top. And, I'm Bryan Danielson. It's going to be me. I have that confidence right now. But I'm going to extend the hand and say, all right, good fight. And you see with heels are going to say, no, screw you. Like, I'm going to walk away. But, you can go out there with a babyface, and babyface might turn right back to him and say, okay, yeah, cool. Or, you know what, next week, let's run it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is great. I'm very excited to see where he goes moving forward, even after the impending title match.
Yes. And the same for Miro.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Who, I mean, technically has an even wider, open field now. There are so many characters for him to stand across from. Although I will say that I'm hoping he gets a nice big win soon, because it's gotta be just to solidify, just nail in the coffin this bit of now he's a big boy, right? Now he's a main event.
I'm curious to see where they put him. Whoever he goes after next, or whoever comes after him next, is going to be a real telltale sign of how high up they see Miro. Because he's above Orange Cassidy, who has had a title shot and been in main events. He's below the current title scene, but not by too much. So in the invisible behind the scenes rankings, how high up is Miro? He's not the number one heel, but he's in the top 5.
Okay.
Is he number 2? Is he number 3? I don't mean to go down a list right now, but I'm curious to see, we're going to see very, very soon where they have him.
And I think part of that is not to make light of or to try and find positives in negatives, right? But I think that the spot that opens up that allows him to do this does come from what's going on with John Moxley. And unfortunate as it is, and, hopefully everything goes well with that, and, we can talk more about that later. I think that it does, if nothing else, provide the opportunity. It gave Miro the stage that it did here, and I think that moving forward, they need someone in that position, and he can fill it very well without encroaching. So our next match was the Falls Count Anywhere match that was actually a street fight. It couldn't be called a street fight because we had a street fight later, which was not a street fight? I don't know. But
it hurts me that we've had this conversation already.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm so burned out on the idea of, because we have to do this twice now. There's another match that's going to come up that is a different version of this match on the same card. And yet they're very close to each other on the card also.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm higher on this than you, but I'm still not high enough on this match to the extent where I'm going to spend a ton of time talking about it.
So if I could, just real quick, very simple, very easy to get out of the way. I was not in any way entertained by this match. Luchasaurus hitting a shooting star press off the ramp was cool. That was neat. Seeing a big guy be flippy like that was cool. I didn't really care for the thumbtack knee pads thing. Jungle Boy had some good spots. I think I'm pretty much done. There's just not a lot for me to talk about in this that I really cared about. It did what it needed to do, and I'm glad that it did what it needed to do, but there are a bunch of other matches that I think I would have rather seen.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'll just throw in there. They're really making Jungle Boy look very good.
Yeah.
Just good, because another pillar right there. Good night for the pillars. And you can see that they're, even with a fresh Adam Cole and Bucks, who are the Buck, that they are still willing to say, okay, look, there's this other guy on the other team. He's the one guy on their team that we really have an investment in. Let's make him look good. Even if the match itself is a spot fest of running all over the place, there are some hijinks in the arena. Some of it's comical. I admit I will chuckle. Some of the spots are like some of the other Young Bucks matches, highly choreographed to the extent that you will look and say, this could not happen. Like, I could barely pull this off in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it in real life. That's impressive, but also, how much belief do you want me to suspend?
The one thing I will say about that is, one of the things I've heard a lot about Full Gear this year, and I think this plays into that, is there was something for everyone, right? And there are people who enjoy that. They enjoy the really spot festy, like, set up to have these cool moment matches. And I'm cool with that. The, like, crazy thing to crazy thing to crazy thing. I have no inherent issue with people enjoying it. But I don't. But I think it's cool that they did that, and that it came off well in the overall, like, viewers.
Yeah, I didn't hate the match by any means. I don't think it's a bad match. I do think that it suffers being what it is on this pay-per-view. Long story short, match was not bad. I enjoyed it, like, watching it live, but it wasn't something that was grabbing me to pay attention to it. I'm just happy Jungle Boy looked good. The rest of everybody else still looked good too, but it was that throwback TLC style, ladder match style, hardcore match style, Falls Count Anywhere match, which turns into a hardcore match. And it's fine. It is what it is, but, like, I'm not, and I hate saying that, but that style is what it is. And you kind of just have to take it and lean into it or not. And it's not my favorite thing. It's not my favorite thing in wrestling. My favorite versions of those matches have come and gone already. So you have very high standards to live up to. And it didn't live up to those. Again, not bad, just the cliff is very steep for that for me.
It's perfectly reasonable, I think. Alright, so with that out of the way, our next match is Malachi Black and Andrade El Idolo versus Pac and the Promised Prince, the crowned prince of wrestling, the Robin Hood of grappling, if you would, the man who
Homelander.
solved racism, Cody Rhodes.
Homelander, man. It's Homelander. Yeah, because out of everybody that comes out on this show, I know several of them are huge nerds and anime and video game and comic book people, and I know Cody is big on some of those things too, but the way their attire is set up, he is by far a character.
Absolutely. And one of the things worth noting is, so Cody is, as far as I know, kind of a comic book nerd, and there's no way the Homelander thing is not apparent, even if it wasn't originally the exact purpose, considering when he started doing it. But it is worth mentioning that he still wears the coat, but a couple of weeks ago, right before he had his, heart-to-heart with the crowd, where he went, alright, listen, I hear you, I get it, but also, no. His tights have now become black. Just the black tights. They have some of the, star-spangled, side stuff on them, but he's no longer wearing the, Uncle Sam Homelander. And I think that's relevant. I think everything he's doing is this very meta thing. Our first episode might not really show this, but as I'm sure you can attest, I have been on the Cody is working us train for the longest time. And after the whole Cody solved racism thing, racism is dead because I have a kid, I maybe started to question it a little bit, but I'm 100% back on that train, especially after this. But even back to when he did that promo where he's like, I hear you, it's not gonna happen, but I hear you, 100%. This is what's happening.
Yeah, I think this is the one where I believe we're in agreement. This is your least favorite match of the night.
This is my second least favorite match.
Okay, that's fair. It just, again, it's not high on the list. This is, I think, at the bottom for me. I think. The only takeaways I have from this are character beats. The match itself, I didn't think was anything to write home about. Considering the talent of these four guys, I expected more.
Underperformed.
Yeah, it underperformed. I don't think it was ever going to be the stellar, spectacular tag match that AEW has had before. But it also, again, underperformed to the extent where I'm looking and even questioning who won and who lost, which is weird for this. The big takeaways for me are this felt like it was, I joked about it, 4 villains walk into a bar. Where Pac is actually the clearest babyface of the group, but has spent so much time as a heel that he's still a heel, and even his name, The Bastard, doesn't really ring as a babyface name. Pac could be heel in 5 seconds. But you have Cody, who the fans are treating as a heel. We've talked about this before. And then you have 2 heels who are cheered as heels. And they're in this match together, but even the heels don't really make sense as a team, because you have one that's a cult-like pseudo-supernatural assassin killer with coming to, take vengeance upon people that he feels have either wronged him or are just in the wrong. And then you have Black Mask, Andrade, who, awesome attire, but he's a businessman, essentially. He runs the show, he has his attitude, and he's something out of a mafia movie or a comic book. But still, these two things do not fit together. And then you have Pac and Cody, who are 2 people who don't really fit together either. We know Cody's the real anomaly in this situation. So yeah, it starts to fall apart. That's the thing that I took away from this. All these relationships that don't make any sense, be it the villains as a team, the heroes as a team, the heroes being heroes, Cody and the crowd, all of these relationships got shuffled up. And that, I think, really needed to happen. That's the only real takeaway I have from this, because I can't say too much about the ring action. It wasn't bad, but just wasn't.
I think they definitely reasoned this match. You know, like you said, they had a goal going into it, and that's what they wanted to do, and that's what they did. And they weren't as interested in putting on, again, a 5-star match that everything has to be. Cody's kind of meta storytelling will, more often than not, have impact on the matches he's in. I feel like Pac is the odd man out here for sure, just because of these 4 guys, 3 of them have these huge bombastic personalities. Like you said, you've got the corruptor, right? You've got the villain, bad guy, who's like shrouded in darkness and mystery. And then you've got the cartel guy, right? He's shrewd, I want what I want, and I'm willing to do what it takes to get it, and that's how things work. Black Mask guy. And then Cody, who's Cody, who will always be an incredibly loud character, whether it be the character he is, the character he wants us to feel like he is, or any mixture of them. So, and I feel like that was also something that was really loud here. I'm very much in favor of creating opportunities to move Black and Andrade as far away from each other as they can. I understand why they put them together. Unfortunately, the glue that would have held them together decided that they didn't actually care about unions, and is now the queen of a ring that I don't generally care about. And now it feels dysfunctional. And while I'll agree that Andrade needs people behind him, right? And he's got Jose, who probably wasn't supposed to be here with him as long as he has been, but will be for very good reasons. He needs people. The unfortunate situation with Ring of Honor could very well change him needing people, but he won't be able to rely on paying for FTR forever. And I think that has to change soon. And with the arrival of our new special guest that we can talk about later, I think we're going to start seeing something like that. Not with him, but more people who can come in and be with Andrade, who are specifically with Andrade. And as for Malachi Black, it seems like he has a lot of plans that he wants to do over a long period of time with this company. Tony Khan is so good at making that happen. The company has done such a good job of planting seeds in Washington. So I have no concern whatsoever. If Malachi Black is a solo guy for his entire career, I'm 100% here for it. If he's not, and like the House of Black is not a metaphor and is literally going to be a stable eventually, super here for that. Doesn't matter either.
Yeah, I would love to see Andrade kind of evolve into a bigger, better version of what Matt Hardy is right now.
Oh, yeah.
Where Matt Hardy almost is a goon himself, and yet he has all these goons that he has for hire. But Andrade is not. Andrade is the mastermind, and he is the guy who, Big Money Matt, well, here's bigger money Andrade. And he could buy out your business right now and take all your goons and maybe take them up a level to be something. Like the Butcher and the Blade with him is a team that makes sense with him of, hey, here's 2 guns for hire. He hired them. They're more lethal now because he may not care about them winning as much. He cares about him winning, them hurting you.
And I love that you brought that up. I'm a big fan of the Butcher and the Blade. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they're top-tier main event talent. But I really like the way that they were introduced as exactly that. These hired mercenaries. And it's been kind of upsetting to me seeing the place that they've fallen into. Especially with how much they've improved over time. And I'm hopeful that that's something that's going to change. It's such a great concept, and they're so good at portraying themselves as such. Their look is like second to none. The moment that they were introduced on screen, I immediately bought them as those guys. And because you don't have to really care about their ring work as much, like you said, it doesn't matter if they win. They're not there to win. They're there to hurt you. It works out perfect. It's exactly. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about this match.
No, let's get to the next one, which is a good one.
Britt Baker and Ty Conti. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to start on this one first, okay? I love Ty Conti. I am so happy seeing her doing the things she's doing. I think she is hands down the most improved wrestler, man, woman, or otherwise, to have made the jump from NXT to anywhere else, or from WWE in general to anywhere else. The style that NXT wanted and the way that they tried to present her, and even just the lack of spots for her, really, really stunted her growth. And she has done so much for herself, talent-wise, character-wise, gimmick-wise, on every level, coming from there to where she is now, and feeling like a legitimate contender for Britt, even if we had the understanding that she was not going to come out of this match. Now, I'm willing to admit that I have a bias, with a long history myself in judo and jiu-jitsu and grappling arts. She ticks all my boxes, right? I love it. I love watching her work. She's really found a very unique style that complements her martial arts skills and her know-how, and it's really cool to see. I do think that, especially after that match, she needs a new finisher. Whatever it may be, she has to have a new finisher.
100%. 100,000% for that, because I know she has two different moves that are themed on her name, and one of them is so awesome, and the other one's a DDT.
Yeah.
I think even the crowd were a little lost with it, where she hits I think it's the Tai KO, which is the, like, gory special-ish spin out into the, like, almost a GTS, like, knee to the face, which is a pretty awesome and unique move. And that she hit pretty early in the match. Not that this was the longest match, but it was a good match for what it was.
Sure.
And she hits that move and goes to the pin, and Baker kicks out, as kind of expected. And there's, like, you know, you get the reaction of, oh, hey, I just hit, like, the finisher. And then later on in the match, she hits the DDT, and commentary flips out like, oh, she finally hit her finisher on Baker and she's about to win. And I'm like, wait, didn't she hit her finisher like 5 minutes ago? And goes for the pin, doesn't win. And everyone's like, oh, Baker, you know, survives the finisher. And it's like, your finisher is a DDT?
Not to mention, it's also someone else on the card's finisher.
Yeah, it's a hammerlock DDT. Mm-hmm. So, you know, she's competing with somebody who literally was just there. And that's not a good look. It's really not a good look. Maybe do something different. Like, you can use a DDT, maybe not a hammerlock DDT, maybe not as a finisher. Especially when you have another move that's just pretty awesome to use. And too much like what you said about her being such an improved talent, and I know we're leaving Baker out of this because Baker's at that level already, where Britt Baker is a star in AEW. Ty Conti has never been a star anywhere. She was blocked at every avenue in NXT. If she got called up to any main roster in WWE, she would have been blocked on Raw and blocked on SmackDown, unless they decided, hey, we like you and we're just going to strap a rocket to your back and make you champion immediately. And that wouldn't have done her any good because she didn't have the reps in. AEW's letting her get those reps in, be it on Dark or Elevation or Rampage, Dynamite, now finally on pay-per-view. She's getting the reps in. And with that, the face paint and the skittle nails and the flag and the lights going out before her entrance, you know, to come up with her there already, she looked like a star.
And her fantastic entrance. Just to throw that out there. Like, AEW does a bang-up job with pretty much everyone's music. I love her entrance theme because it feels so perfect for her. It's this very almost Street Fighter character-esque music, and man, it fits her perfectly. By the way, I checked. She debuted in 2017. So, absolutely every good reason to still be green. I still think she's come so far, and for someone who's only been wrestling for a couple of years, is doing phenomenal.
Yeah, she's only behind a handful of people with that similar time frame. Like someone like a Bianca Belair is ahead of her, but Bianca Belair is insanely talented and has also received the ability to work with people who are insanely talented. Kai Conti is also very, very talented. I don't want to say insanely over and over again, but she's very, very talented. And she has unique talents with the martial arts background, but she has never had that ability to, at least on TV, work with people who are at or above her skill level. She was in there with other developmental people, and she got a handful of minutes at a time. And AEW is giving her a better opportunity to face people around her level so she can grow with them. That's great.
And, of course, we can't really talk about a Britt Baker match and not just praise how far Britt Baker has come since the inception of AEW. And she's really become one of the staple characters of AEW, and I'm so impressed with how they handled it, because it's one of those times where you could see they went, okay, this is what we want to do, and the fans made it clear that it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to be what they wanted. It wasn't going to work out the way they wanted. They could have tried to, like, Roman Reigns it and been like, you'll accept it eventually. But they accepted, they stepped back, they readjusted, and man, look how far she's gotten. Easily, I'd say, the most over woman on their roster.
By far.
Yeah, and just, she's, even just in the ring, she's come so far. Being a heel by itself has done wonders for her. And I'm really excited to just watch, because she's young. She's got a long career ahead of her. I'm excited to see where it goes. I also think she is one of those people who you could put in the ring with almost anyone at this point and put on at least a decent match. She can carry people. She's really good. And though their women's division has come very far, that's still something that I think they need. Also, love seeing Jamie Hayter. Fantastic talent. Hopefully she gets to do more in the coming months. Just honorary mention. So the next match on the card is my favorite match, not counting the main. And I have so much to say about this match. I'll try not to go insane, but there's a lot that I do want to bring up. So CM Punk versus Eddie Kingston. We talked about this match a little bit before it happened, and I was like, I wonder if there are two ways the match could go, right? I wonder if they're going to do that really classic AJPW, King's Road, fiery blood, test of willpower match, or if they're just going to beat the shit out of each other. And they told us immediately, as the match was ready to begin, what it was going to be. And boy, did they do a phenomenal, fantastic job. Such a great slugfest, a fantastic brawl. They really did beat the shit out of it.
Yeah, I don't know where you put the pin in it of where is the coming out party for Eddie Kingston. Because it's before this, but this solidified it. This is the one where it's like, okay, yeah, no, Punk is back. Punk is a guy who can still hit those levels that he used to hit. Maybe not quite as high, but they're still there. There's still way more gas in the tank for CM Punk. Like, he can still go, even with a 7-year hiatus. Eddie Kingston is a guy who's never hit those levels before. And never in a way where any crowd of this size has seen it. And so now you have him in the ring with a guy who has called himself the best in the world. And Eddie Kingston is doing what Eddie Kingston said he was going to do, and that is fight him and hurt him. And that's the story that this match was. You know, both guys accomplished what they wanted to. Eddie Kingston hurt CM Punk. CM Punk beat Eddie Kingston. That is exactly what both guys said they were going to do, and they both accomplished it. So at least on that level, the philosophical level, so to speak, they're both winners. I would never say that to Eddie Kingston's face right now. but they're both winners.
So I think if I had to pick a moment since Eddie Kingston's been in AEW, that is the moment that's like, this is where he began to be relevant, right? It has to be him and Moxley, right? The promos he had, he talks about their history, he talks about their past, and he talks about like what he's had to deal with versus like the first world problems that Jon Moxley had, right? Oh, poor fucking you. You went to the biggest company in the world and were upset with the way that they portrayed you on weekly television that was internationally shown. Poor guy. So you want to talk about having a chip on your shoulder, right? And it gave him the opportunity to do all the things that he does so well. Eddie Kingston feels like very much the another one of those kind of like Britt Baker almost AEW guys, right? He's one of those people who the crowd just loves, and it's not hard to see. He's so passionate about what he does, and he's so clearly also a fan, right? Like that's one of the things that makes it so easy to like Eddie Kingston, is that under everything else, he's a fan. He could go out there and just throw hands, but he doesn't want to do that, right? He could be a brawler and a scrapper, and he does sometimes, but it doesn't stop him from things like the spinning backflips. It doesn't stop him from like the Saito suplex. It doesn't stop him from like the back suplex driver or the half and half suit. He does these things because he loves wrestling and he wants that to be part of his life in wrestling.
Yeah, he's somebody who he and Punk are, and this goes back to something you said earlier with what's going on with Jon Moxley, of not to take something good out of something bad and make light of a situation, because I'm not. These two guys are the perfect representation of everything from that angle. Everything. Like every angle of not just Jon Moxley, not just what's going on in Jon Moxley's life right now, but also just looking at everything in that situation. Looking at somebody who is going through something so hard in his life where he has to make a difficult decision. That is what this match is. That's what happened in Jon Moxley's life. The guy had to step away from doing something he loves at a time when he is finding a hot streak again to take care of himself and do the right thing. That is exactly what CM Punk did. In a different way, different circumstances, but CM Punk walked away from the thing that he loves because he didn't love it anymore. Because it was hurting him. Because it was in some ways killing him. Eddie Kingston, likewise, pushed forward doing the thing that he loved, even though it wasn't helping him. It wasn't getting him to where he needed to be in life, to the extent that he almost had to quit because he was forced, not because he wanted to. He definitely didn't want to, but he's looking at it from the situation of like, man, I get what it's like to have to make some difficult decisions. And Punk is going from the complete opposite side of the coin. Yeah, man, I get you, except we can't see eye to eye right now because we're facing in different directions. And it encapsulates everything that's going on with, Moxley, people in Moxley's situation who are hopefully also getting the help that they need. I'll always advocate for that. But AEW has handled this really well. Tony Khan let two guys go out there and tell a story without completely taking and putting Jon Moxley's face on it. They're telling a story about Jon Moxley. They're telling a story about each other. They're telling a story about themselves. And they're telling a story that a lot of other people can relate to.
And that's 100% exactly why this is, outside of the main event, my favorite match. Because it so perfectly exemplifies what AEW is and what it means, right? Because like you said, you've got CM Punk, who walked away from the business because he couldn't love it anymore. It became a toxic relationship. And it took this company for him to come back. It took seeing a healthy way to do what he loves safely, properly, to be able to rekindle that romance. And like you said, for Eddie as well, it was this thing where Eddie's such a great mental health advocate, and he's such a loud voice about it, which is one of my favorite things about Eddie Kingston. I think really what makes him such an important staple of the company, especially like, look, the pandemic is what it is. COVID is what it is. And over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, things have been really hard for a lot of people. I definitely have not been excluded from that. I know a lot of people are the same. Things have been hard. A lot of people have been hit really, really roughly. And Eddie Kingston is such a great way to tell those people they're not alone, and to allow them to see that expressed in a way that is acceptable and alright. And so he's that character now, where he represents so many people who are hurting and lost and frustrated because every day is a struggle. And now, after years of being told, you're not tall enough, you're not in shape enough, you're not technically proficient enough, you're too thug, you have an attitude problem, all of these things that make you not desirable. Now,
you're a bum.
You're a bum.
You're a bum, Eddie.
You're a bum, Eddie. All these things now are exactly why he is what he is, and why he's so beloved, and why he's so good. And AEW saved him from having to be like, well, I guess they're right. I can't do this. He sold his boots like a year and a half ago. That's how close he came to just not doing this anymore. And it was AEW that was able to be like, stop. Let's show you an alternative. Let's be the change that we want to see in the business. And so, yeah, this is a match about John Mox. This is a match about what he's going through, and what so many people are going through. Even more than that, this is a match that exemplifies the heart and soul of AEW as a company, to be able to be like, we can do this better. We can do this differently. We can be healthy, right? And not to be preachy about it, but like, we can not release people without their contracts, even if maybe we don't use them. We can find places where guys who wouldn't be considered top talent or even TV ready guys to be a huge part of what we're doing. And that's so fantastic in this match, was all of those pieces. Right from the promos leading up to it to the end of the match where Eddie walks out on it, right? Where CM Punk has to acknowledge him at the end of this, and it's like, alright, well, you know what? Clearly, you're not the guy that you were, or at least not the guy I thought you were. You got it. And for Eddie to be like, well, yeah, but I knew that. Fuck you. Walk away. It speaks volumes, because that's what it's always been. Yeah, I know that, and I've been telling you that forever. And so that's why this is my favorite match. And honestly, not counting the main event. And honestly, I don't know where things go that will top this, because of how this felt. And because of how much they said in what was, I believe, I'm double checking. Yeah, in what was the shortest match on.
Oh, really?
Not even close. It was 11 minutes on the dot, and the next shortest match was
Conti Baker. It had, right?
15 minutes. Conti Baker. Yeah.
Wow, they went 15. I liked that match more than I thought I did, because that did not 15 minutes.
Yep. And
this one, the reason why I think this match is lower for me right now is because how much it resonated with me. And it resonated with me in ways that are more negative than positive. At least from a state of like seeing people go through such struggles, going through not those exact struggles, but some of my own struggles in my life. And it's something where maybe watching it the first time or the second time, or just right now, I look at it and I say, okay, maybe I just need to step away from those things and not be reminded of them. But the match itself and the story is definitely there. And I think there are so many positives to it. It's my third favorite match, right? And it's by a hair. So, again, by no means am I, taking a dump on this. I'm looking at it and saying, no, this is great. The things above it are also great.
Oh, yeah.
So it's still in the great category. And the matches that come right after, I still think are also pretty great. I think I'm even higher on this card after a second viewing than I was the first time. So more props to it.
I can agree with you.
But yeah, up next, I know we're like going a little long, but up next is a fast one, right?
So the Minnesota Street Fight, just like the segment on Dynamite, just like the segment 2 weeks ago on Dynamite, the two good things that have come from this entire story are Dan Lambert as the parody of the voice of anti-AEW people, which is great. I love it. And Paige Van Zant's fetish for beating up Chris Jericho. But overall, it's been a WWE segment. It continues to feel like a WWE segment. The match felt like a WWE match, to the point that they didn't even know the rules going into it, right? Like, we started as like tagging, and then weapons came out, and everything went to shit. But the other thing I will say that's funny is, if nothing else, because one side of this match was super green, most of it was super green, not taking anything away from Ethan Page or Scorpio Sky, you got to see Jericho directing a lot of traffic, and I didn't notice it the first time, because I was pretty burnt out from everything, and I was pretty emotionally exhausted after CM Punk Eddie Kingston, and I knew I needed to recuperate for the main event. So I watched it, but I couldn't really care for it. And so on my rewatch is when I really started to notice there are so many times where you can just flat out see Chris Jericho like directing traffic. To the point where I couldn't help but laugh as we got near the ending. He goes for the lion salt on Dan Lambert, and Junior Dos Santos is supposed to like rock him, and he's not there. So Jericho jumps on the ropes and has to stand there, and he's like, Junior! And in my head, I'm like, I didn't catch that the first time because I've heard Chris Jericho call people Junior so many times throughout his career that it just didn't register for me as like what it was.
So Junior just gets up and clocks him because, Jericho had to get him there, which is good. And he doesn't hit the lion salt because we're still building to this finish with Lambert, which is good. Again, we needed to get there. This is the payoff to everything. But the real emotional thing happens with the finish. And again, the perfect place for this, right? This is the one emotional beat that if you're going to take anything away from this whole match, it's the time, the place, the date, Eddie Guerrero, the anniversary of his passing, in the place where he passed away 16 years ago, I believe I have that right.
I believe.
And Chris Jericho being a guy who had been in the ring with Eddie Guerrero, had such history with Eddie Guerrero.
Almost their entire careers.
Yeah, all the way back to the beginning, and so many moments. And unfortunately, maybe there's a portion of AEW's audience that doesn't know, but there's enough that's accessible now. You can bump over and get Peacock and probably go back and find like a whole bunch of stuff featuring Eddie Guerrero from his WWE days, WCW days, and it's all really good stuff. Of course, older Chris Jericho stuff as well, but there's such crossover there. So to have Jericho be the guy to win this match using Eddie's moves, paying tribute to him in such a way, which had been done multiple times throughout the night, but to have that happen, it brought a tear to my eye. I'm not the biggest Chris Jericho fan, especially in this stage of his career, but to have that happen and to make that moment, Jericho finally getting vengeance on Dan Lambert, finally shutting up Dan Lambert, but to have that be the way in which he did it was so appropriate. And I'm probably not going to go back and watch this match maybe ever again, but that moment right there is the takeaway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's hard not to see a finish like that with all the circumstances being what they are. I think it's almost funny that a company that Eddie Guerrero was never a part of, but definitely that he and his family have roots in. If you really look at it, did such a really good unofficial tribute show for him, because that was in some ways what this was. There were a couple times throughout the night, and this was just such a great capstone on that. And you're right, because it was Jericho, and because it was what it was, and how it was, and where it was, and when it was, it resonated. And I think that is an especially powerful thing, because really that's what Eddie Guerrero did best, right? He resonated. He was, one of the SmackDown 6 guys, because his body of work, both in the ring and on the mic and just backstage, were these things that it was really hard not to enjoy. Whether, it was the more fast-paced stuff or the technical stuff, or just his, passion and that shit-eating grin. The charming, you can't see it and not smile, right? Guerrero charm. That really did that. I think that's really cool. Will always hold a special place in my heart, because he was a big part of how I managed to get my mother, who was very anti-wrestling, to watch wrestling. Funnily enough, him and Chris Jericho are her two favorite guys.
That makes sense, and I think that a lot of people in our age range, or who started watching wrestling before or around the time when we did in the late 90s and early 2000s, would have been very exposed to the body of work of Eddie Guerrero, and would have a very high appreciation for him and what he did. Seeing him be, as I said earlier, a guy who watched SmackDown all the time. Eddie Guerrero, from 2002 to 2005, when he unfortunately passed away, was such a focal point of SmackDown, be it in the mid-card as a tag team champion, Chavo, or I think Ray and Tajiri, I think, at one point in time also.
Yeah.
Also a United States champion, and then defeating Brock Lesnar to win the WWE championship. He had so many memorable moments and feuds and matches and promos and just so much stuff he put out there that was entertaining. And it brought me to a place where I could, again, be someone who anticipated what came next. I looked forward to Eddie Guerrero matches because Eddie Guerrero was a character that was telling me stories that I was invested in. And losing him was a huge moment in my life following wrestling. I remember coming home and my mom told me that she heard on the radio that a wrestler passed away. And my immediate gut reaction was that, it was probably some older, retired person. It's still unfortunate, but someone who, these things happen, some legend that somebody had heard of back in the day had passed away later on in life. And then going online and watching and reading and seeing what had happened, I was devastated because I felt like I had just seen him on TV the day before. So it was tragic, of course, and you see through the tribute shows that WWE did for him and the obvious impact on so many other people in the wrestling business since then. It's wonderful to see that a company that had, like you said, really no direct connection with him whatsoever. The company itself is over a decade removed from his passing when their inception happened. So to see that they're still so heavily influenced to be able to do something like this is just amazing. And it speaks volumes to his impact on not just one company, but wrestling as a whole.
That's very true. So then, before we get to the main event, one more thing that we have to bring up. So with the unfortunate downfall of Ring of Honor, comes a whole slew of new talent that's available. And I wouldn't be surprised if, while he's the first, he probably won't be the last. Jay Lethal making his debut at Full Gear. Thoughts?
He's a new guy. I don't have a huge history with Jay Lethal. My main exposure to him was TNA back in the 2000s when I dabbled a bit in watching them as an alternative in the down years of WWE, the latter half, let's say 2007 to 2010-ish. And I enjoyed him for what he was. He was a very outspoken, colorful, charismatic character guy. And he was enjoyable. He was never a main eventer at that level. I don't think he ever really got the opportunity to put on amazing match after amazing match because TNA at that era became dominated by former WWE guys and legends coming in and eating up most of all of the airtime, really. And that's why I stopped watching it. That's why I think a lot of people stopped watching it. And I know he had success elsewhere. And I know he had success in Ring of Honor. And I've heard good things, but I haven't seen the good things. So I'm hoping that him coming in here is, at the very least, going to be maybe a notch above what Bobby Fish is. Maybe 2. I don't know how high. I don't know what the ceiling is on Jay Lethal at this stage in his career. I don't know what the ceiling is for what they see in him coming into AEW and what they want to give him. But at the very least, if he can come in and work with guys, like immediately he's going to be working with Sammy Guevara, which is awesome. Sammy needs something coming out of the last match that we just talked about to say, hey, the 4 Pillars pretty much had the best night that they could possibly have. Sammy was not really the focal point of his match, but here's something for him immediately. So let's, solidify him as a good champion. Let's keep going forward with that. And maybe Jay Lethal could find something to come off of that. Maybe the 2 of them have a program going forward. I don't know, but I'm interested. Again, I'm interested in seeing something. That's just another piece of why would I want to watch Dynamite this week? And AEW is really good at doing that.
Yeah, I absolutely have to agree. I echo you completely on him kind of being a higher carded Bobby Fish. He's definitely getting to the twilight of his career, and it doesn't mean that he's not still very talented. But I can't see him, being the main event. I can't see him, headlining pay-per-views. But he definitely will be a device that helps a lot of guys break through that sort of glass ceiling. And I think it's going to be very telling how the match between him and Sammy goes. From there, really, who knows? AEW's been very good about utilizing their talent and making everyone feel valuable, from the guys who do really kind of get booked to lose often to the middle, the back and forth guys to the top tier. So I think it's definitely something to look forward to. I think no matter what role they put him in, it's going to be very enjoyable. So we're finally here.
For what feels like the 15th time.
It does.
I know. Well, I mean, you let the people know. Technically, we've had issues, but it's okay. We made it to the main event, which is, how do you phrase it? What do you call it? How is this the biggest main event? This is the biggest main event AEW has ever had.
Oh yeah, it's the end of Act 1 for the company as a whole, with not just this match, but with the pay-per-view in totality. But very much with this match, which has almost from the birth of the company, has been something that they were like this. This is what we're doing. And this is going to be the sort of prototype for our storytelling. Let's do this. And it is the culmination of that, of this love story of wrestling.
Yeah, for the older listeners who were watching WWF in the 90s, late 90s especially, and for the younger ones who don't know, to me this feels very much like a WrestleMania 14 Shawn Michaels versus Stone Cold. This is the passing of a torch moment. It's very, very clearly the passing of a torch moment. It is the build of a star, the unstoppable force that at the time was Stone Cold, but here is Hangman Adam Page. And you build that story, you see it over time, the fans get behind them, they know that this is the moment, this is the time, they are ready. And they are ready to embrace this person as their new champion. And that's what this was. And it was set up to be as the story. I don't know if when AEW was founded and they made the decision to go with Jericho or Hangman, which was the right decision, but at the time, I don't know if Tony Khan sat down in a room and said, well, yeah, it's Full Gear 2 years from now. That's when he'll be ready. I think that's a little too much credit to give. But they let the story breathe. They let it grow. They didn't turn him heel. When they could have. They turned Kenny heel when they didn't need to. And they made so many decisions along the way. And they've used the history of both of those characters before the company and said, hey, if you followed it the whole way, not just, 2 or 3 years, but like, if you've been following Kenny Omega and the Bullet Club and the Elite and all these guys the whole way, we still care about you. We're still going to include those details in this story. If you haven't been, and you've been involved with AEW for a year and a half, something like that, maybe from day one, you still got the story. You still know it. It's still there. If you don't watch, Being the Elite or anything like that, you may miss some details, but it's still there for you. You're still going to get it. The emotional resonance is still there. And you can see that in the crowd signs that they brought. From the digs at Kenny's pants to just the simple ones of cowboy shit with cowboy crossed out and it says champion shit. And then the other one with, instead of the anxious millennial cowboy, it's the righteous millennial cowboy. And then, of course, the one in the front row, which made my night, of Kenny right before he's about to get to the ring, just turns and sees the sign right there in the front row. And the camera captures it perfectly, and Kenny pauses and looks at it because he knows, and it just says, "What would Kota think?" Which plays back on the whole history of him and Kota Ibushi, the Golden Lovers, New Japan, Kota being in his corner when he finally defeated Okada to win the title in what some will say is the best match of all time. And then the ending of specifically Matt Jackson being the one to give almost a pass or a blessing or a nod, an acknowledgement. Yeah. An acknowledgement of, okay, this is the right place, this is the right time, this is going to happen. To get in the way would be wrong. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, absolutely. And the build. Okay, so I'm gonna go pretty far back and then work my way to what I was gonna say. Because there's just, like you said, there's so much to say about this. I've been a New Japan mark for a very long time. I love New Japan. I've watched New Japan for a long time. Kenny Okada is, some of the best wrestling that I've ever seen in my life. And, talking about the Bullet Club and Hangman Page, and I can tell you that as much as I loved New Japan and as much as I loved the Bullet Club, I could not give a single fuck about Adam Page up to and including the birth of AEW. Couldn't care less.
I'll just quickly add into that. I'm at the exact same spot where you are for that, except I didn't follow New Japan like that. But going into AEW, same, didn't care about Hangman.
And as we talked about at the beginning, as the jaded wrestling fan looking at AEW and going, okay, but they took Adam Page and were like, this is a guy, and we're investing in this guy. And I went, okay, well, nepotism exists, and, like, good for him, I guess. But that's a weird hill to die on. Man, what a fucking idiot I was. They have done such a fantastic job of taking people, not just people who didn't know him, but people who did know him, and just didn't care, and give you every single reason to care about him. Just making him feel like a person who really does represent the best of us, right? That's what worked so well. And yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and go, yeah, from the day that they started this, they knew Full Gear on Saturday, that was when it was gonna happen, hands down, set. But they knew the direction they wanted to take it, and they spent the time, and they took care, and they did a phenomenal job of doing that, of making him feel like the best of us at every step. When he, gets to his lowest lows, and the way that he just imploded with the self-loathing and the frustration, we've all been there, right? Everyone's been there before, and just sort of almost forcibly being made to confront it and watching him grow back up, find friends who weren't too busy, who he didn't have the history with that, made it valid for them to kind of be like, you know what, but fuck you. Because he did. He got insufferable as he descended into that self-loathing. And he made bad decisions because he didn't want to face himself. And it wasn't until he came across these guys who were listless and didn't really know where they were going that he finally found a place where he could just be him, not be burdened by expectations that he set on himself. And that was so fantastic. And just watching as he grew and as he adapted, it's impossible not to fall in love, not to be enamored with this. And then coming to, more recent stuff, just the last couple of weeks, the promo at the contract signing, I think, was such a great way to culminate everything that had been building up to it, right? His whole thing about how, I figured it out. It's not that you were being my friend, it's that you knew that if you didn't try and find ways to keep me happy with mediocrity, that it would light the fire that it lit in you. That you knew that it could lead me down that path. And then to achieve it without having to do what Kenny did, right? Because that's the big difference here. Kenny Omega, to become the top guy in any company, New Japan and here, had to become a bad guy. He had to decide that he wanted to win more than he wanted to be a competitor, or than he wanted to wrestle with someone that, he loved, in the case of, like, him and Kota, where he was always in Kota's shadow, and he created this expectation of, I have to at least be able to be as good as him, or else I'm not enough. And he did that by becoming a member of Bullet Club. He did that by becoming the cleaner. He did that by saying, well, fuck it. This is more important. And that's what he did here in AEW, right? He let Callis get in his ear. And he cheated Moxley, and he turned heel. And
well, even before that, he beat Adam Page at Full Gear without being super heel Kenny Omega. That was pre-Don Callis. That was pre... Like, he was better than Hangman Adam Page last year. That's as big a part of this as any. And so that moment of Page going back and saying, like, wait. Right before you descended into being this bad guy again, we had our match, and you won. And you turned and you looked at me and essentially said to me, that's as good as you'll ever be, right? That's not what he said, but, like, that's essentially the gist of it.
That's the connotation.
Yeah, you hit your ceiling. My ceiling's above yours. Okay, cool. But then to have the realization, seeing Kenny's descent afterward, and being like, wait a minute, wait. I was anxious going in, and kind of was coming out because of what you said to me. But really, the confidence that you had going into that match, if I had that, maybe I would have won. The reason why I lost is because I didn't think, I thought in my head about all of this. I didn't think I could beat you, or at least I thought there was a good chance that I would lose. You know, that was a very real possibility for me, and it wasn't for you. But you walked out of that match knowing that, wait, actually there was a very real possibility that Hangman could have won this match. It's possible. And you started to get anxious about it. So you surrounded yourself again with everybody to keep yourself safe and make yourself strong. Whereas I learned how to do it myself. And I learned because the friends that I got along the way helped me. They picked me up. They put me back on a path to being, oh, wait, Hangman Adam Page. When Hangman Adam Page believes in Hangman Adam Page by himself, he's a world championship contender. He is a world champion. And that is just amazing. But like, to that promo, as you just said, like bring back to that moment. And I don't even, you know, again, I don't know if they saw all this coming with that moment and Don Callis afterward and all that stuff. Like, just being able to do that and see that that's where the story went is just awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to that point, the story that they told from bell to bell was as passionate as anything, right? It was so good, and it was such a great example of who they are as characters, both now and ever. Because, you know, bell rings, and Kenny's being Kenny, and he's cocky, and he's confident, and he's brash, even though he's projecting. And this time, Paige isn't buying it. Hangman knows. He knows he can beat him. He knows he can do it, and so he starts to pull ahead. And he starts to get the advantage. Then Callis gets involved, right? And Callis does Callis things, and it's just enough for Kenny to edge him out. And the moment he does, the vast majority of the match from that point forward is Kenny being the counter wrestler that he is. He's got him at every step, because that's what Kenny Omega excels at. He's good at beating you at what you do. It's always just the hallmark of Kenny, and here, unlike his matches leading up to it, wasn't just, okay, Snapdragon, 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 V-Trigger, 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 One-Winged Angel, One-Winged Angel, One-Winged Angel, we're gonna hit it eventually. This was him wrestling. And even if it wasn't the best bout machine, because the truth is, as the match showed us, he's slipped. He's become the Robert Baratheon, right? He's become the fat, lazy king who has become complacent in his place and let his paranoia beat out his talents. And here, he's trying. This is Kenny Omega doing his best to be the Kenny Omega he was. But the truth is that right now, he's not, because of all that. And that's not to say Hangman couldn't beat that Kenny Omega either. But Kenny was just constantly one step ahead, and it didn't matter. Because at the end of it, Hangman's willpower is what won him that match. The fact that he went, I know I can beat you, and I'm gonna beat you, god damn it. And he takes every loss. He goes for the buckshot, right? He goes for the buckshot, and Kenny's just like, V-trigger, bang! He was ready for it. Didn't matter. Wasn't gonna be enough. You've got a spot that I've never seen before in wrestling.
Yes.
Amazing
spot. The springboard Liger bomb off the top, which I don't know how you even begin to plan to have that as a move.
I don't know. And it's even more impressive when you consider, based on what we know afterwards, his shoulder is completely blown out. He couldn't put any real weight on one of his shoulders for the entire match. And that's so impressive.
Again, I go back to WrestleMania 14 with HBK versus Austin. Shawn's back was basically broken in that match, and yet you look at it, and I wince when I look at some of the moves that he does, because I'm like, how is he not falling apart? And this is another one where you look at Kenny and you're just like, yeah, no, he is that good. He is that insanely, in his words, like, god of pro wrestling good, and it's just Hangman could be that good. Hangman can be at that level, and they finally showed us that. To your point before of like, Kenny is not that on that night because it's been proven through the story that's been told. Kenny Omega with Don Callis in his corner is not as good as Kenny Omega with the Young Bucks in his corner. And Kenny Omega with the Young Bucks in his corner is nowhere near as good as Kenny Omega with Kota Ibushi in his corner. And that's that final piece where Kenny got to the top, to challenge with the Young Bucks, with the Bullet Club, with the Elite. Kenny got to the pinnacle. He got beyond. He transcended everything else when he was true to himself, and he stood side by side with Kota Ibushi. And Kota looked at him and said, "You can do it." And Kenny said, "Yeah, I can." He walked into that last match with Okada saying, "Hey, no. I know we did this 3 times. Yeah, okay, I know I won the last one. It wasn't for the title and all that. But, like, I know with the title on the line, I can beat you. I know. 100%. No doubts." And Hangman took that role this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what made, like you mentioned, the thing with the Young Bucks coming out, specifically with him and Matt, mean so much, where he's just like, yeah, this is it. This is your moment. This is your time. And it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything it needed to be. Also, props to Aubrey Edwards for that full-on fucking sprint down the ramp. just going the whole way. That was great. That was fantastic to see. Hits the buckshot twice. Pins Kenny Omega. That crowd lost their shit. And it was perfect. It was perfect. And then having the Dark Order come out, having them come out to celebrate with him after allowing him to do what he needed to do on his own, by himself, despite the interference, despite the potential threat from the Young Bucks when they first came out, they understood he had to be there alone. He had to prove that by himself, despite all of that. And then they come down, and they're with him, and that moment where Alex Reynolds hands him the beer, and he just throws it away and hugs them. And it's such a beautiful, such a perfect moment, especially when you remember that Reynolds was also the one who's like, "Hangman, it's time." He's the one who was like, you know you can do this. You know you have this. He was that last little push that Hangman needed, and now here he is. You can still have a drink to celebrate every so often, but that's not what tonight's about, right? Without a thought, just almost with like a wry smile on his face when he does it, right? Where he just chucks it behind him and says, "Fuck that," and just goes in and embraces them. It's so beautiful and so powerful of him with these guys who all of them now kind of have found their place with each other in, and we've said it a couple times already, in what really felt like just the closing scene of Act 1 for AEW.
Yeah, because Hangman, from his perspective, he was a member of the Bullet Club, he was a member of the Elite, and especially with the Elite, he looked at them as like friends or family, but wasn't treated as such. And then getting kicked out of the group and stumbling and falling and then finding the Dark Order, he has now found that group where they looked at him at first being like, new leader? Okay, you tell us what to do, we follow your lead. But it's eventually just turned into, no, they're really good friends. They're good people who want to be good friends with each other. And yeah, are they going to disagree sometimes? Are there going to be problems and arguments? Yeah, but they've learned how to actually communicate with each other. And that's such a powerful thing for knowing how to talk to your friends in a way where if they need help or need to go, you can respect each other. And that was something that wasn't happening with the Elite, which is why, like, it took so long for Hangman to be the one to just say, you know what? Screw it. I need to close this chapter. I need to end Act 1. In order for me to go to Act 2, I have to go to the Young Bucks and say, what happened happened. I've been wrong before. I can acknowledge that. I know you've been wrong before to me. Okay, cool. Let's call it even. I'm sorry. But this pay-per-view, it's over. Act 1 ends one way or another, right? And that is such a big deal for this. So that, like, I got emotional at the end with Dark Order stuff because they hug happens, and man, I'm just like, this is perfect. And then they go off the air with that.
Mm-hmm.
That is one hell of a strong way to end a pay-per-view. You know, there have been so many championship celebrations to end pay-per-views, and there are very, very few of them. I can only think of, you know, at least one or two in my head that have ended at such an emotional peak as that. And this is definitely one of them. This is started by saying it makes me excited to see what comes next. All the best things in life when, you know, entertainment, TV episodes, movies, seasons of something, books, whatever the case may be, when a great one ends and there's still room to go, it makes you want more. Full Gear, I know that this part of the story is over, but I want more.
And, you know, it's great because moving into Act 2, we already have the hook we need, right? Because Hangman Adam Page beating Kenny Omega was a foregone conclusion. We knew it would happen. Maybe it wasn't tonight, but if we put all kayfabe aside for the moment, we knew this was going to happen. But now, how the hell does he beat Bryan Danielson?
Oh man, that is one hell of a question. And that's not even what's coming this week. But when it does, whenever it does, because I can't imagine they're waiting all the way to Revolution for that. I don't know if they're doing another Winter is Coming, and I don't know how big they're going to make the first show on TBS. Those are two big shows coming up for them in the next month to month and a half. So that's a lot of good time to give people enough rest and rehab, relaxation, whatever the case may be. Put yourself back together. I know there are some injuries coming out of Full Gear, but get that time in. Let's have the celebrations. Let's have the handshakes. Let's have the contract signings. And then, come on, man, give me that match.
Yeah. So just to put a pin in this, phenomenal pay-per-view. Maybe not technically the best show that they've put on, match to match, but I think still probably the best show they've put on as far as just like emotional response, storytelling, just the weight of the show. And I think it is a great closing performance. And man, I'm so excited for what is essentially moving into the end and seeing the next threads that get pulled and that start being woven.
So to your point, if you look at everybody up and down the card, there are very few people that you know what's coming next for them. Just about every match has landed somebody in a situation where you could say, hey, I don't know exactly what's next for them. Now, obviously, we have a title match. We're probably getting a rematch for the tag titles. Besides that, most everybody has ended a chapter of sorts. And that's pretty amazing to do. It feels almost like a WrestleMania from years ago when WrestleMania was the culmination of everything rather than, oh, we're just going to have Backlash like a couple of weeks later. But it really does feel like, no, they planned for this. They set just about everything up to the point where if they want to shuffle up the roster and put people in new positions and in a new order, they can. And AEW is usually good at doing that anyway, but they really have set up some people. I can't think about who didn't look good coming out of this show. And that's very high praise to say for a pay-per-view.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, it's, that closing of the chapter. It's going to be really interesting seeing where everyone falls moving forward. And I think that is as good a place as any for us to leave it for this week. I guess this is the part where we outro, right?
Yeah, we know how to do that, right? I swear, we'll get better at this. I swear. Probably. Maybe.
Give it like 100 episodes.
Give us 2 more full gears. We can do it. I believe in us.
Okay. Well, thank you for hanging out with us and hearing what we have to say and sharing this fantastic pay-per-view. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're listening to us through YouTube. Give us a follow through Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, or wherever else you may be listening. You can always drop me a line personally on Twitter at TheLionKnight42. And we'll be back here next week talking about more good wrestling, hopefully.
Yeah, give us some feedback, people. Feedback's great. I like feedback.
Feedback's great. So from myself and Joe, have a good night.